I was requested to respond on Kyle Kulinski in response on Milton Friedman, and it was an argument, something to do with the Ford Pinto.
This clip, to me, demonstrates the number one problem with these adherents to pure laissez-faire capitalism. Let's watch.
This has to do with the Ford Pinto. I'm not sure if you're aware of the recent revelations that have come out about the production of that car. Ford produced it knowing full well that in any rear-end collision, the gas tank would blow up because they had failed to install a $13 plastic block in front of the gas tank. And Ford estimated in an internal memo that that would cost about 200 lives a year. And they estimated further that the cost of each life would be $200,000. They multiplied and they found that the cost of installing those blocks in each of the cars would be more than the cost of saving those 200 lives.
Milton Friedman's argument was more or less to say, on principle, that it should really be down to the consumer to decide rather than being forced to pay out the higher cost, even although if it does save 200 lives. How I get around responding on that in particular with what Kyle Kulinski is making an argument on, as if to say libertarianism is silly, is the fact that he's ignoring the mismanagement of government, the government's intervention, and how that is costing so many countless thousands of people's lives every single year on the roads. There's no denying the fact that there are certain problems on the roads today, the drink driving, people who get into accidents through speeding, etc. He exonerates government of the blame. Government's management has a lot to say on such problems on the roads. The truth is when government runs something or when government manages something, it is guaranteed money nonetheless through taxation, etc. It doesn't take accountability for how it runs it. No matter how poorly it runs, no matter how many people's lives are cost every single year, it still gets the money. It's still rewarded for that. Doesn't really have any incentive to improve as such. And with regards to that of a free market, you've got private competition. Now with government, it doesn't have this risk-reward nexus. It doesn't exist. The risk-reward nexus is out the door because when it comes to government, there's no risk involved. It's just guaranteed money. Government doesn't have to work for your money. It simply spends it, and it can take as much money as it likes regardless of how poorly it's run. It's not the same story with the private sector and a free market economy, because you are faced with the risk-reward nexus. You're faced with the risk because if you run poorly as a private company, eventually you're going to face losses. Well, you will face losses. You'll eventually face bankruptcy. It's just like if you look at the NHS as an example, there's no risk-reward nexus. Regardless of how poor it operates, regardless of how poorly the government runs it, it's still guaranteed the money because it's not faced with the profit-loss system. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that someone owns a private road. Let's say there's so many accidents that are caused on such a road that this private company owns. This harms their reputation. This company is going to end up facing losses against their competition because the truth is, people are going to seek alternative routes, etc. When this company is going to face losses, eventually this company is going to go out of business. When it comes to private companies owning, private roads, they've got an incentive to improve that. Losses incentivize you to avoid that, to stop doing what you're doing wrong. And of course the private company would therefore be in control also over the rules over such roads, etc. So you might ask yourself the question, okay, well what about the speeding then? Well, what the private company may do is set down specific rules on this road in order to improve it if it's got such problems on it. So the company itself will determine that itself. So it's not a case that, oh well, if you leave it down to private companies, there's no rules or nothing, it's just a free-for-all. And that's how they think things operate, whereas government, regardless of how high the death toll has been, etc., it continues to be rewarded for such behaviour. Things are not as simplistic as what Kyle Kulinski is trying to argue on libertarianism, because the way he's trying to ridicule libertarianism on, pure laissez-faire is as if to say that what we're arguing for is something based on a free-for-all where there's no rules at all, and so if there's, accidents as such, there's the reputation that goes with that, it'll tarnish the company, etc., and they have the incentive to change the rules or whatever it may be that help improve as such.
And there you need government regulations to say, okay, you're going to have to pull that product down because it doesn't have the same effects that they claim it has. See, the problem with these guys is that they don't buy into the basic idea of a social contract. To them, any idea of a social contract is a restriction on liberty. So any taxation is a restriction on liberty. Any regulation is a restriction of liberty. And they disregard the obvious reality that all modern civilizations have some form of a social contract with taxation, with basic marketplace regulation to prevent the abuses of the marketplace.
So he's only looking at, oh well, you see all these accidents on the road, it must be the fault of the people themselves. Okay, you could say that partially, where, people shouldn't be drinking and driving, all these type of things. You can understand their argument in that sense. He's not looking at the government's management, because let's face it, when it comes to, especially in the United States of America, the government is heavily involved, it's heavily in control. Well, another thing that you've got to look at is road congestion. You can actually look at government and say, well, the mismanagement is creating a problem, especially with road congestion, and therefore, because of the mismanagement, it's creating a problem, and that can lead to accidents in of itself. Such private companies do have that risk-reward nexus. They've got an incentive to improve, so regardless of whether it's drunk driving, speeding, etc., or a congestion problem, at least with the market, has the incentive to improve that situation. So, for example, in the laws of supply and demand, if so many, motorists are trying to use the one road, the price will drive up. It'll incentivize people to seek an alternative, or of course, they'll build other roads, etc., more efficiently to get them to and from their locations and whatnot. He's basically trying to say, yeah, government is not a problem. Government's, not the issue at all. It's as if to say government has got nothing at all to do with the high death toll on the roads in the United States of America today per year, or even in Great Britain. When it comes down to the argument he makes on Milton Friedman, he ignores the fact that it's down to the moral principle, that it should be down to the consumer free to choose whether he wishes to get the car with the cheaper parts. And of course, it's down to that, individual, rather than forcing all consumers to pay out a far higher cost on motors just because of this one particular part, all in the name of apparently saving lives. Maybe you could actually alleviate such a problem by saving way more lives per year on the roads by fixing such a problem by having private ownership of roads, where you do have private companies, and if you're faced with such a problem, trust me, such failure would not last. They would go into liquidation, and of course more efficient companies would take over. It certainly isn't like he's trying to paint it with libertarianism. We are not arguing for something based on something lacking rules. If you've got anything you would like to add in yourself, comment in the comment section below. I hope you like the video, be sure to share the video or whatnot, and of course, thank you for watching. I know it has been a wee bit, and I took a wee break at least, and of course I will have a live stream coming up. But anyway, I'm looking to get out more content, and of course, thank you for watching, and I shall talk to you later. Cheers.